If it hasn't happened to you yet, it will. Right there. We've got a broken bolt. This is one of the things that's just going to happen when you're working on cars or working on anything with threaded fasteners. This one is actually not too big of a deal because we do have a best case scenario where the bolt is sticking out. You know, and really, because we're down here in Texas, most of our broken bolts are actually pretty easy to remove if the car is a native Texas or Oklahoma vehicle. And that's because we don't use a lot of corrosives on the road to melt, you know, ice and whatnot. We don't get ice here very long, and if we do, we just put down the sand because we know it'll be gone soon. But this video is going to be about removing broken bolts. I've got a couple techniques here, and we're just going to go through them. I think I've got 3 or 4 bolts to remove, all in the same situation. Like this is just a GM 5.3 cylinder head, and it has, you know, a bolt broken where it's protruding, and then I have the other ones which are bolt broken either below the surface or they are flush with the surface. And we're going to talk about the different methods of doing it. So let me get this head out of the way and we'll get started. So the very first thing that most people do when they break a bolt, of course there's a lot of cussing, but we don't want to cuss that much. We want to try and be professionals about it. So the first thing a real technician is going to do is they're going to think to themselves, how did it break? Was it broken already when it came in? Did I break it? Did my helper break it? You know, it's how did it break? If we were tightening a bolt and it started to tighten up before it bottomed out, then that bolt's cross-threaded and we twisted the bolt off. So that means the bolt has, you know, it's not been stretched, it's been twisted. So that means the torque overcame the strength of the bolt, and the reason it overcame it is because the threads were locking up. That's probably the worst case scenario other than being heavily corroded in the hole, because you're not just going to get that thing out using, you know, a method like this here, because these are relatively low torque methods. So the next thing that we're going to do is, the next possibility is maybe when I was tightening it down it broke. Maybe there was something wrong with the bolt and it just snapped. Or it could be that the vehicle came in, the bolt was broken, and you know, maybe it was because of rust jacking or exhaust manifolds that have distorted. That's a possibility too. So we try to figure out how it broke, and this is something that's normally just going to be kind of second nature. We're going to be like, oh crap, let me get this first. And if it's a bolt that snapped off, it bottomed out, and you were just torquing it and it just snapped very easily and very quickly, the very first set of tools are going to be some picks. And picks are really helpful because what if when that bolt broke, it was just a crappy bolt, and you can put a pick down inside there, just like this. You can put a pick down inside that hole and just start scratching the bolt out. So we've got a bolt, you know, this isn't a good example, but we've got a bolt, we just start trying to scratch it out of the hole to where we can maybe get it above the surface, and we grab it with our fingers and just unscrew it from the hole. That's probably the best way to do it. I wouldn't say the best way. It's obviously going to be the fastest way because it requires, you know, just a pick. Now, we don't always have easy access to things as far as, you know, on the vehicle where the broken bolt is. So a whole bunch of different types of picks are usually pretty handy. Now, the next style is one of those things that if you've got it, it's worth a shot. And that's going to be using a Dremel and a small flat tip screwdriver. So with a Dremel, you're going to put a blade on there so you can cut a notch in the end of the bolt, and then you're just going to use the screwdriver to unscrew it. Now this isn't going to work on a bolt that's been cross-threaded or a bolt that's got, you know, corroded or heavily corroded threads to where they're locked into the casting or whatever bracket that they're screwed into. This is going to work on the one where the pick can move it, it just can't unscrew it. So you can pull out a Dremel, something like this, with a small cutoff wheel, put a small gash in the end of the bolt, and then just unscrew it, and bing, bang, boom, you can get that thing out. For me, the very next step, if the bolt is protruding, is to get this guy right here. So what this is basically a drill chuck. It's a drill chuck that works in reverse, and it also has a hex end on it and a 3/8 square in the end of it. The way that this thing works is it really only works in one direction. So as we're unscrewing it, which is in this direction, the jaws in the center come together. So the harder you try to unscrew a bolt, the harder those jaws grab onto it. And these actually work really well, not just for broken bolts that are protruding, but for studs. If you need to remove the studs off an intake or off of an exhaust or anything that has a stud, this right here is actually a really excellent tool. Like, this is the Titan one. I think it's a 16023. Bought this thing from AutoZone. I have probably 90% of the time I've used this guy with an impact, and I've never had it fail, knock on wood, because, you know, it's just a really good design. Now, this original design was made by a company from Germany. If I remember, it might be Baum Tools, but that thing is expensive. It was over $200 here in the States. This one, I believe I got it for $28. And I know AutoZone and O'Reilly sell different versions. They have an OEM version, the OEM brand, and the Titan, and then another one. I think Duralast might sell one. But this has really saved me a lot of time. I love this thing. If I can't do that, my very next tool is not so much a tool on the table here. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more. It is to make a bolt. So this right here, from this washer down, is the broken bolt. And I've got two methods, and the first method is to put a washer around the hole where the bolt was broken. I can weld through the washer to the bolt and then to the washer, and then I just set a nut on top of it, and I weld the nut to the washer. So I've got, you know, two versions. One's a little better than the other, but it's the same thing, and this is one way I can do it. The second method is just to set the washer down over the bolt that's broken and weld through the washer with your MIG welder, weld the bolt, and as you're welding the bolt, you're going to slowly come out of the hole and start to weld the nut. And it gives you two things. One thing is, obviously, you're getting a new handle to put a wrench on it. The second thing is that the heat that you're introducing into this system is usually, you know, helpful. It's going to help cause things to expand. So these are normally screwed into this application. It's screwed into an aluminum head. That aluminum of the cylinder head is going to grow quite a bit more than the bolt. And, you know, initially, yeah, the bolt's going to grow because it's going to be hotter. It's going to be hot enough to melt, but it's also going to cool pretty quickly. And the head is going to stay warm, and it's going to stay larger, so that when you hook up a socket or a wrench onto this, it usually, you know, unscrews with just a little bit of effort. Of course, nothing's against putting a little bit of penetrating lubricant in there, like PB Blaster or Knocker Loose. But this is really my second go-to, and my primary one if the bolt is flush or below the hole. But if it's something that has just a little bit of stick out and I can't get my little chuck thing onto it, then I instantly go over to welding nuts and bolts and washers to it. This next method is not my favorite, and in all honesty, I had to go out and buy this set. These are traditional bolt extractors. And this set is unique in that I wouldn't say it's unique, but there's something unique about the common looking pieces in there. So let me first pull out one of the drill bits. So I've got a traditional drill bit here, and I have this drill bit over here. But we see the fluting. This fluting goes in one direction, and that fluting goes in the other direction. These that come in the kit are a left-hand drill bit. So your first possibility of getting it out is using this drill bit to drill the bolt. And because it's going left-handed, meaning it's going to be unscrewing the bolt, this guy might catch and the bolt might unscrew out of the hole. Bing, bang, boom, you're good to go. And heck, these things actually work really, really well. But I didn't have a set of these. So let's say that bolt is really stuck and you drill the bolt out, and you have to drill it on center. If you get off center and you hit any part of the casting or the bracket around the bolt, these tools will not help you, okay? So you have to drill it on center. So you drill this hole with the left-handed drill bit, and let's say it doesn't catch at all. Your next step is to put in this extractor. And obviously we see we have a whole bunch of different sizes here. But this extractor, it works, you know, it's a spiral wedge. And as you screw this thing in the left-handed turning direction, it forces itself in deeper. And these, I wouldn't call them serrations, these peaks in between the flutings, these spirals right here, they're designed to actually grab the inside of the hole where you drilled and hopefully get enough traction to start unscrewing the bolt. The issues I have with these are not so much my personal experience with them directly, it is my secondhand experience, because people bring things to me with broken bolts in them, and they oftentimes either have a broken drill bit or they have a broken extractor. The problem with either one of these being broken off in the hole is that they are a lot harder than a regular drill bit, because I'm going to have to go to the next step. And if this thing is really in there, that could actually cause that bolt to expand into the hole and lock it in even worse. So that means I would have to step in with a specialized, well, I wouldn't call it specialized, but an uncommon tool, and sometimes an expensive tool. Like, let me see if I can find one here. Well, here's the aftermath of a repair. This guy right here is a piece of tungsten carbide. It used to be a 4-fluted end mill that I would use to plunge down into a broken bolt or a broken extractor. This is a lot harder than this, but this is still a lot harder than, you know, a drill bit, and it's going to be really hard to drill this guy out. So to do this, to get the extractor out, I use an end mill. The problem with this application was that the customer didn't tell me that not only did he have the extractor broken in there, but below the extractor was a drill bit. And because drill bits aren't solid cord, there's a lot of small pieces it like to catch. And this right here, even though it's really, really hard, it is also very brittle, and it breaks this end mill. This end mill was probably about 30 bucks, and obviously the customer, they got charged for it because that was just part of the deal. I tell anybody that brings stuff to me on a repeat basis, I say don't drill it, because I can tell if they have the skills or not to drill a hole, because it's not just about making it deep, it's making it in the right position and making it perpendicular in 2 directions. But these guys right here, they are usable. You just have to be careful. These extractors, they obviously get very weak the smaller you go. So we have this thing all the way down to, gosh, I think that's like 3 or 4 hairs wide. You're not pulling a bolt out with very much torque with this one over here. The next step up, you're not pulling out a bolt with very much more torque than that one. And when it comes to cars, the ones that you're going to try to use the most are going to be from this drill bit down to this guy right here. So these 4 tools are the ones that you're going to use the most. You're going to be tempted to use this one, say on an 8mm bolt, but the problem is you're going to make the bolt so thin that when you screw this thing in, those ribs are going to cause the bolt to expand and lock the bolt into the hole. So you do have to size it proportionally. And the instructions will usually come with it. But we'll give one of these a try. And honestly, because of the situation, I'm pretty sure that the drill bit's probably going to take it out. So we'll see what happens, right? So there's that one. And these are, remember like I said, the harder you try to screw them in, the more force they put against the outside of the bolt, which could cause it to expand. Now this next set is a pretty comprehensive set. This one was made for Rigid, the Rigid brand. This was before Home Depot owned them, but Blue Point actually sold this same toolkit and everything, and it works really well, and it has a benefit over the other system because these don't expand the bolt. So you start off by, let's go ahead and get a set together here. You start off by drilling a hole. Now this would have to be a very large bolt to use something this big, but you're going to drill the hole, and these are right-handed drill bits, so the drill bit's not going to get it out. There's no luck in that. So after you drill it, you're then going to hammer in one of these. Let me see if I can get a closer shot on this guy. So you're going to hammer in this guy here, and you might see that there's those lines right there. Let me get something to point with. These lines right here, that right there, these are vertical ribs that go down the length of this tool, this extractor. This hole is sized for this extractor, and if you're not sure, it actually says on this which one to use. You're going to hammer this guy down into it. This one is not going to expand it as much as the previous extractors. It's just going to create a spline. It's essentially going to broach a spline down inside that hole. And then with that in place, you then put on either a tap wrench or a socket, and you attempt to unscrew that bolt. Okay. Now these are, in a lot of cases, these are directional. I can't quite focus on it. These don't appear to be directional, but some of them are directional where the teeth are less symmetric. They're more asymmetric, like a sawtooth. But you see this set right here has got, you know, quite a few options. You have drill bushings over here. Let me back you off again. You've got drill bushings on this end, so let's say the bolt is way below the surface. You can size the correct drill bushing to put down in the hole so that you drill that bolt dead on center. And it has different sizes of bushings and all that stuff. And of course it goes all the way from the very tiniest ones right here all the way up to the very large ones over here. Now these large ones are more than likely not going to be used for a broken bolt. They're going to be used for a broken fitting, and that's what those are for. The package is going to come with some other extractors, different sizes for various different purposes for MPT fittings and whatnot. Like this guy right here is saying it's for a 1/4 inch pipe fitting. This is 1/8 inch, there's a 1/2 inch, and then a 3/4 pipe fitting, and that's what these are for. So our ideal is that we get the bolt out without breaking any of our tools, like what happened with my my carbide end mill. But it just, one of those things, it just doesn't always work perfectly. So the first thing we're going to do is use that guy right there with an impact and see if we can get that bolt that is protruding from the surface out of the cylinder head. Here we are with our broken bolt. Now this broken bolt is sticking out, let's say, a little under 1/2 inch, but this is really the best case you could ever get for for something like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is use this tool here, and like I said, as you unscrew this thing, you'll see that those teeth come out of the center, or not teeth, they're actually jaws. There we go. See those 3 jaws there? They're going to start protruding from the center of this guy, and as they come out, they come together. Now this thing works really well on, you know, about 7mm and up. So it's you know, it's great for 8mm. So here I am. I'm going to go ahead and put it on there. The other nice thing about it is you don't need any power tools. All you need to do is put your ratchet on there and go backwards. It's going to start to grab onto that stud. Let's see how lucky we get. Oh, that was too easy. Yeah. But you see, it wasn't hard. Now, what some technicians will do is they'll reach into their toolbox and they'll grab possibly their most favoritist tool. It'll be some version of one of these. It'll be one of these guys. The problem with this is as we're rotating this around, you could really gouge the heck out of the surface to get the bolt out. But there we go. Number one's done. The other thing that I remember, if you remember what I said, is 90% of the time I use this guy on my impact, and man, it works so good like that. I just love it. It's just the bee's knees. All right, let's set up for the next one. Next one we're going to be using, first we're obviously going to start with a pick to try and see if we can get it to move. And then from there, we're going to try to drill out the bolt with the left-handed drill bit. Okay, we're on to our next bolt. This one is flush underneath the cylinder, so it's below the surface of the head. And I'm trying to wiggle it with my pick, and there's no dice. It's just not happening. There's no movement. I can see there's a little bit of rust around it, so there might be some rust actually holding it in. So we're going to have to go into drilling it. Now, before you drill, you have to center punch it so that you locate the center of that bolt. Because like I said, you do not want to drill off center. I want to drill straight down the depth of that hole, okay, both in this direction and in this direction. Because if you were to drill off at an angle, and you start to drill into the aluminum, and then you install the extractor, how are you going to extract the aluminum from the aluminum? It's just not going to work. So let's go ahead and try and center punch this. So I'm going to carefully locate the center of this bolt. I think that's pretty good right there. And then one whack. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, trying to identify which extractor I want to use, you can use an adjacent hole the correct size. Now, I don't want an extractor that's going to grab onto this bolt hole only, a half an inch in, because obviously that's not going to be enough of the bolt to grab onto. Ideally, we're going to be able to put this thing in the hole and it's going to be able to wiggle some. That means it'll leave some of the bolt in place. So we're going to use this drill bit, which is a left-handed drill bit. Now you've got to be mindful of this, because I have seen some people spend quite a bit of time trying to drill with a left-handed drill bit going in the wrong direction, and that's not something that we want to try to do, because you're just going to damage the drill bit. Okay, so let's see if we can get a good shot of this. Let me go in at an angle. Here I go, I did it backwards. I am not on center. Let me get my punch out, and I'm going to re-punch this hole, or re-punch the bolt. I'm just going to go right next to it. The nice thing about metal is it's malleable. So I can re-punch this pretty effectively to reposition it. All right, so let's try this again. Not dead on center, but I think we'll be okay. Now, I'm not being safe by putting my hand over here. If this drill bit were to break and the drill were to go off and hit my hand, I'd definitely go pretty deep. Notice I'm not going super fast. It's not a race. Now if that drill bit does catch and it starts to unscrew the bolt, you'll feel the drill push back against you. And that's when you just start to push a little bit more, maybe go a little bit slower with the drill. But I'm not feeling this thing push back at all. Yep. Looks like we're going to be using the extractor on this one. Go to this hole, and I'm going to go to this one. So it looks like we're still shy a little bit. And remember, the bolt isn't going to go all the way to the bottom of the hole. It's going to get close. So we should be getting close to through the hole, or through the bolt. And that's through. All right, now it is good to go all the way through the bolt because you need to be able to get some penetrating fluid all the way to the bottom of the hole to hopefully help it break free. Okay, so we've got the hole drilled all the way through. I'm going to take the extractor and I'm going to tap it into the hole just to get it started. And on this one I'm going to use a tap handle, realizing that, you know, tap handles don't always fit. And let's see if we can get this guy to unscrew. Oop, gotta put it in the squares. There we go. Okay, cool. Now we're ready. And let's see if this guy unscrews. Dang, we got 2 in a row. Look how lucky we are. So you can see what's happening is that the extractor, because it's tapered, it's smaller in the beginning and it gets larger out here, and these ribs are actually going to cut into the bolt, because when I tapped it in it kind of made little slots for them, and it then starts to unscrew that, and bing bang boom, there we go, we got it out. You can see that, yeah, I wasn't even close to being on center. It was starting to drill out the side, but the good thing is all the threads are intact. I probably just kissed the aluminum in the bottom of the hole just a slight bit, so that hole is perfectly fine. To get it off, you just grab it with a pair of vice grips, because I've seen people's extractor sets that still have bolts on them. And then you're going to take your tap wrench or whatever tool you used, and we're actually going to turn it clockwise to pop it out of there. Okay, so the next step that we're going to do is move into the welder, and we're going to do the washer and the nut method. And now the rigid set is going to work almost exactly like this extractor set here. So the rigid set is really the same instructions. It's drill a hole, hammer the tool in, and then pray when you start to turn it counterclockwise that it backs out. So we'll see you at the welder. Here we are at our third and final broken bolts. Yeah, we might, well, no, I think that's all they have. 1, 2, yeah, okay. We got our third and final. And on this one, I decided to go ahead and do the washer and nut method. Oops, gotta change it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do first is put a washer in place, weld through the washer, you know, just kind of reach down through it with a MIG gun, and I'm going to weld to the bolt. Now luckily this is an aluminum head, so if it does hit the aluminum, it's not going to stick to it. You still do have to be careful with that. And I'm going to build that bead up until I then come in contact with the washer, and then I'm going to fill in the washer. So it's essentially going to extend that bolt to this washer. Well, you think, well, what's the use of a washer? Well, a washer provides a very nice place to put a nut, and then I can put a weld on each side on opposite flats of this nut, and I can just use a 9/16 wrench to get this bolt out. Oops. So the way that I did this traditionally in the past is anytime we rebuilt an engine that had locking rocker nuts, I'd keep all the rocker nuts. So these right here are off of a Ford, and this is a new one off of a GM. And I like these because they're tapered here at the bottom. They're kind of an acorn style. So when you set this thing down on a surface, if it does weld and stick and it lifts up on one side because of contraction, well, this corner is not going to hurt the head as it spins around. So these work really well for that. And I do understand that, you know, in a perfect world, you'd be able to access everything. Real life is not a perfect world. So you do what you can. Sometimes you'll have somebody with a pair of vice grips holding that nut in place while you tack it in. But you know, that's a lot easier than removing a cylinder head off the engine just to get a broken bolt out. Now, I won't be videoing the actual welding because I don't have a way to protect the camera lens, the camera sensor. So I'm just going to do a before and then an after and then another after. So we'll be back in a minute. Oh, well, hold on. Let's do a quick demonstration. So I got my really dirty MIG gun here. Let's do. All right. So real quick explanation here. We've got a MIG gun here. This is the actual MIG gun, sometimes called the MIG torch. And it has in it a tip, and out of the tip there's wire. This wire is going to be running out continuously when I pull the trigger on this end. So let me back out a little bit. So when I pull this trigger, power is going to be applied to the wire. The wire is going to start to come out. And at the same time, through these holes in the nozzle, let's see if we can get those in the shot. See if there's a hole right there. Through those holes, a mix of carbon dioxide and argon, I believe it's C25, is going to flow out and shroud where this thing is going to be melting onto the parent material. And when it does shroud it, it's going to displace any oxygen, which is going to prevent oxidation, which could cause porous welding. So you put the nozzle on the tip, and the nozzle is simply there to help direct that flow down into where you're welding so you don't let it oxidize and cause a very brittle weld. All right, so the first step is done. I've taken the washer, I welded through the washer to the bolt, and I've slowly backed out, and the bead actually came out and contacted the washer. And now I've got a bolt connected to a washer. So the next step, I'm going to be using this nut. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to weld through the nut to the washer, build up the washer until it starts to contact the nut, and then connect the two with a solid bead. And that's really all we have to do in this next part. After that, I'm going to use a 9/16 wrench to hopefully unscrew the bolt out of the hole. Okay, so see you in a minute. The nut is welded in place and we're ready to get a wrench. Let me see how long it takes me to find a 9/16 wrench. Did I say 9/16? I meant 13 or ½ inch. So let's see if we can get this thing out. Now you don't want to just start reefing on this thing because there might be something in the threads. So you're going to go a little bit and then go back, and you're going to slowly start to release the bolt from the hole that it's in. There you go. So it looks like it's coming right out. Now whenever somebody brings me a GM V8 cylinder head or a Ford or a Dodge cylinder head with exhaust bolts broken off in them, this is the method I use. I tell them I'd rather you wait with a broken bolt in there than leave it after trying to put in or trying to do it with an extractor. So just leave it to me and I'll take care of it. If you just leave the broken bolt, it's one price. If it comes in with an extractor broken off in it, that's a whole other deal. Not to mention it usually takes less time. And there we go. So we've got our bolt out and, well, the remnants of the bolt. So now we have a new bolt out of the hole, and the hole's all ready to go. So I guess that's everything when it comes to removing broken bolts. Now these are all honestly really best case scenarios. There are times when you're going to have a bolt that's broken off and it's going to be cross-threaded is why it's broken. And in those cases, none of these methods will probably work, and you'll be relegated to drilling the hole out, drilling it oversized, and putting in a thread insert. And that's just the life of it. And when you do that, when you are forced to do that method, you want to make sure you get that thing back on center. Because if you're drilling a bolt out, as soon as that drill bit is exposed to aluminum around the bolt, the drill bit is going to want to go into that softer section. So your bolt hole will not only be out of position, it will be out of round. And I understand that because these components might be in place in the vehicle, it's going to be very hard to position them properly. So you can do something, you can make a pretty simple drill guide, which would be just anything of some thickness, say a piece of aluminum, say about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick. And on the table, on your workbench, you're going to drill that hole as square as you possibly can through that bolt or through that plate. And then you're going to put that up against the hole, and you're going to use it as a guide to make sure you're at least perpendicular in both directions. Or you could actually purchase, they are commercially available drill guides. They actually sit on a flat surface. They come with different bushings, and you can actually drill a hole of specific sizes, and it will make sure it's perpendicular in both directions. But you're not going to have that when you need it, because who buys things ahead of time, right? So until next time, thanks for watching.